Hi, it's Sebastian from SkyComp Solutions, and today we're going to do an in-depth comparison between the Yamaha CS-700 and the Poly Studio X30. Now, conference cameras come in all different shapes and sizes. We at SkyComp are a big fan of the Poly Studio series, but we've recently acquired a Yamaha CS-700, and it is a slightly different video conferencing bar. It has a little bit different options than the Poly provides, but we're going to dive into the camera quality and audio quality of both these devices. So you're wondering about camera quality because when you're in a conference room and maybe the lighting isn't as good as the studio lighting we have here, and you're way at the end of the conference table, you're really concerned about that audio quality, and comparing the two might help you make a decision on which one you want to buy. So I have both devices recording in OBS. If you're familiar with OBS, it's just a way to get the raw data from the camera so that you're able to see it in real form. Some different virtual meeting platforms like Zoom or Teams or WebEx, they compress that footage. They compress that raw data so that it's able to send out in packets over the internet so you can have a live virtual call with no lag. But OBS leaves all the quality there so that you're able to see what the camera actually is picking up. So this is really great for us to do this test. And it's really going to help you make a decision on which camera quality is better or which one works better for you. Okay, so let's dive in. Let's look at the Poly Studio X30's camera quality and audio quality. So looking at this laptop, I have the Poly heading into this laptop recording on OBS live. So you're able to see the exact what that camera is pushing out. So you can see it's a very wide angle lens, and it's a really nice high quality. You can actually see a little bit of the Yamaha in the corner of the in the frame there. You can see it's so wide it's picking up the other camera I have below it. I have the Poly on top and the Yamaha below it. You can see that some of the whites are a little bit overexposed here. These are a little, you can't really make out the .ca and skycomp.ca. That's just because we have the brightness settings a little bit higher so that my face picks up a little bit nicer and you can hear and see what I'm saying. Other than that, the exposure looks really good. I'm using 2 studio LED lights, so it's pretty bright in here. And you can always adjust your brightness with the Poly Studio, and it's very straightforward to do so. What we did, or I just did, was turn the tracking feature on. So now it finds me in a close-up, finds focus, and zooms in. And when a camera zooms in, usually it's going to change the f-stop, it's going to change the exposure a bit, so you can see it got a little bit darker, but it still looks pretty darn good. Looks pretty great. Perfect. So that's with the zoom in feature on, and obviously when a camera zooms in, the quality is going to decrease. If we go back just to a normal kind of wide shot, so the quality is obviously way better at this distance. And right now I'm recording in OBS at 1920 by 1080 HD. So talking about the different lenses, I'm going to talk directly in the Poly so you can hear the audio a little bit as well as we're recording this. With a smaller camera lens like we have on the Poly, because it's a little bit smaller, that means the sensor size is smaller. And that means it has more chance of getting grain or little specks in your footage. So if you're looking at this, if you look really closely, maybe at the blue wall, maybe right beside on the left-hand side of this TV, you might be able to see in some of the darker areas a little bit of grain happening. And that's normal for this type of conference camera, and it really doesn't affect the overall quality, but you will notice things like that, and it's different depending on the size of your sensor and depending on the camera that you're using. So the bigger the camera, the bigger the sensor, and the better quality of footage and the less grain you're going to have in that footage. So that's something to think about when shopping around. These both have fairly small lenses, and most conference systems have very small lenses. If you're looking for something that doesn't have any grain in it at all, you should consider an AV kind of broadcast setup. Those are going to be way higher quality for you and do a way better job. But if you're just into a conference system, these will do great things for you. So this is, now we're talking about the audio of the Poly. This is the Poly's microphone that we're picking up right now. I've switched from the lav mic that I'm wearing to the Poly Studio microphone. And I'm about a good meter from the device itself. So you can really tell that it's a really powerful audio system, and it does a good job of cutting out any noise. It really does great things when there's feedback, or there's a possibility of feedback if someone is, for example, playing a song or music over a Teams meeting and you're using the Poly. The Poly does a really great job of cutting that through that noise and focusing on what's important. So there's the Poly overview. There's the camera quality of it. You can really get a good look at how it looks, how it feels. We're at Skycomp very happy with the Poly overall. And if you're interested in more information about that, we've written an article comparing these two devices. So you can go check that out at skycomp.ca/learn, and we'll put the link to that in the description. Now, let's move on to the Yamaha CS-700, and that's just below the Poly, so it's on this computer over here. That's where we're recording it. So you can see that the Yamaha has a slightly different look to it. It doesn't look exactly like the Poly, and we'll bring the Poly up side by side here for a second. We'll put a side-by-side shot of each one. And I spent some time in both of these cameras settings, making sure that the exposures were about matched. And it's really tough to get things, especially because they're two different sensors, two different cameras, to match exactly. But we got pretty close. You can see that maybe it's a little bit darker around my chin and neck than in the Poly shot. You can also see that the shadows and contrast are more pronounced. So, you know, the blacks are more black in the Poly Studio. So if you're looking at the tablecloth here and the laptop screens, they're a little bit more black. Whereas in the Yamaha's camera, it's a little bit, you can see more of the gray. The blue is slightly different as well. It's a brighter, more pronounced blue in the Poly, and the white wall in the background is just a little bit dimmer, a little bit darker. So you can really tell there's just minimal differences between the two. It's also a little bit less wide. So the Poly has a little bit bigger of a field of view. I believe it's 120 degrees field of view. No, sorry, 180 degrees field of view. And the Yamaha, I think, is just a little bit below that. So it doesn't pick up as much of the space, but it's still a great quality camera system. And you can see, you can hear now the difference of the mic between the Yamaha, and again, I'm the same distance. I'm about a foot away from the Yamaha's microphone. A couple of technical differences that we didn't really touch on. Both have the option to wirelessly connect to certain devices. The Yamaha CS-700 is better with Bluetooth and better with NFC connections. So if you want to pair a phone to it, it does a better job with that, whereas the Poly does a great job with it, but the Poly's more meant for plugging in an HDMI and sharing your screen that way. The Poly also has a more built-in software system. So we have a video of the overview of the Poly, and you can actually click that link up here. I'll put it at the top of the screen, and you can watch a full overview of how to use the Poly interface and share content. And they have a whiteboard. There's a whole bunch of network settings you can change. You can turn tracking on and off. You can set camera presets, whereas the Yamaha doesn't have those exact same settings, but it can do a couple different things. So I mentioned we had an NFC connection and Bluetooth. You also have the option to connect an external microphone. So whether that's an auxiliary input of that microphone, so an 1/8" jack, you can plug in, like music, like you would a car stereo. You can also connect a Yamaha CS-700 specific microphone. It can be a wireless mic pack like the one I'm wearing for the studio, or it can be a wired mic that you can set in the center of your conference room table. So you have a whole bunch of options with both devices, and it's kind of up to you which one makes sense for you. In the article over at skycomp.ca/learn, we actually go over those details in both devices to give you a better idea, a comparison table, so you can actually look down the list and see that has that feature, that doesn't have that feature, and maybe that will help you make your decision. If I had to pick between one of the cameras, I would actually prefer myself the Poly Studio, just because it has a little bit more features, the camera quality is a little bit nicer, and it's a little bit more of a small, compact setup. It doesn't take up a bunch of space. I'll show you some B-roll of the Yamaha, and the Yamaha itself is just a slight bit bigger. You know, it's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit bulkier, and in this case, depending on the scale of your conference room, you might not want a big video bar at the top or bottom of your TV. So it's all up to preference. Again, the camera quality is about the same. So that's a basic overview of the two different devices. I hope you got a good comparison of both audio channels, how they sounded, how it kind of feels to listen and be a part of a conference with one of these devices. Overall, there's tons of different devices that you can use in your conference room that make that virtual meeting experience more human, more real, more live and direct. And the more that we can do and use technology, in my belief, to elevate those meetings, make them higher quality, make everyone heard in those meetings, I think that's what's important to take away. So if you're looking for more information on a virtual meeting setup, we actually have a couple different options, and we talk about in an article on skycomp.ca/learn the ultimate virtual meeting setup. And that's using broadcast devices. That's completely forgetting about any conference pre-built system, and it's building your own system. And it's not quite the same. It's maybe not as user-friendly, but if you're looking for that quality, if you feel like these devices are missing something, and you want that next level, check out that article. That'll help you out a lot. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. And if you want to check out more videos about the Poly Studio, you can click over here. And if you want to watch other videos about maybe Microsoft Teams, you can click over here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.